I'll give you that one. They did. They do that. They did do that.
But then you have issues with 1914 because Charles Hayes Russell, who got all these dates from Barber and the Second Day Adventists, who were calculating, when all of this would come, and they had all these numbers. Originally, Christ's presence began in 1874, right? And so they would predict that the end would come in 1914.
Yeah.
So Jesus' presence began not in 1914, but they believed in 1874, 1875 at that time.
At that time.
So their expectation for 1914 was not that the Gentile times had ended or that was the beginning of the end, because that's what every doomsday cult says, right?
Yeah,
when they are wrong. Like, remember that guy back in 2011? He was predicting the end of the world May 2011 or whatever it was, and it was wrong. Happened. And then what did he say? He said when it didn't happen in May or the day passed, he said, "Oh, there's a 6-month period. It's just the beginning of the end. So it will happen in October now."
Yeah,
so he bought himself another 6 months, and then when that didn't happen, then it was like he disappeared and like it was a big fallout.
They moved the goalpost, and that's one thing that I never really liked is when they start making predictions, when they don't have any miraculous ability to do that.
So the issue with that is like either you're a prophet with inspiration or you're not. Because you want it both ways. You want to be able to say we predicted something, but we're not a prophet. So it's kind of like having your cake and eating it too. It's like we want to make predictions in God's name, in the name of Jehovah, right? And to do so, the penalty is death, because you'd be a false prophet.
Yes.
Because the fruit of any false prophet is false prophecy.
Did you see it's...
So you have to be very careful. So it's one thing to say.
Very careful.
So it's one thing to say, "Oh, we use God's name and this and that," but then it can backfire, which is okay, you're using God's name, but then you have the penalty that God sets forth for misusing His name. Do not take the Lord's name in vain, right?
Well, no, and that's not really a fair explanation, because...
But the Deuteronomy, I know what the scripture you're referring to. Whoever speaks in the name of Jehovah and it does not come true,
it makes a prophecy in their name.
He's a false prophet. Do not listen to him. Exactly. And the penalty is death.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what the issue with Elijah and the Baal prophets was when they settled they were false prophets. They were killed.
So that's... a lot of witnesses misunderstand that, and one of the latest broadcasts of the governing body straightened that out, because that's a question I had years ago, and it was in dealing with Baptists who were accusing us of doing that, and really the issue is, like, we don't claim to be miraculously inspired. So what does prophecy mean? Well, it depends on which definition, because a prophet can be two things. It can be someone who makes a divine pronouncement of God that
they've received information, or they've been inspired to write scripture, or they're just reiterating something that's already been said.
Exactly.
And I know that definition.
Yeah, and that's the definition we apply to ourselves. Now, other people apply, say, hey, you made predictions, but we don't, that's not, we have no miraculous ability to predict the future, even though it's kind of almost like that sometimes when it becomes almost doctrinal. So it's like putting on two hats. I understand that, and I don't agree with that.
The issue goes beyond 1914, because then you had Rutherford with 1925, which was the millions now living.
And 22.
1918, there's a whole bunch of dates that they came up with that he kept putting out.
Those. They don't.
But his whole campaign was the millions now living will never die, and that they thought that the resurrection would start in 1925, and that you had the Beth Sarim, and he was living there during
faithful men of old would come back in 22.
But it's quite convenient. He was living there in a big mansion in the Great Depression while everybody else was sort of what's it. But they predicted 1925 people would come back, and then you had 19.
Wait. Let's go back to what Russell said. He said, we're not predicting anything. He said, this is what we think is going to happen. And they were wrong. They were only half right.
Well, no, he said, if you look at the studies in scriptures, he said, this day is for sure. It's set in stone. Nothing can change it. That's what he said.
I don't remember reading that, because I looked at it.
Okay, but then he republished, after 1914 it failed, he released a new edition of the book where he edited and took out, his mistakes quite conveniently.
No, I'll take a look at that. Yeah. But from what I've read, he said beforehand that we're not predicting anything. This is our understanding at the time, and this is Russell's word, we're not predicting anything here, this is our understanding, and basically he was saying if it's wrong, we'll have to go back to the drawing board, but we don't have that, and we've never claimed to have
Well,
it.
his claim was he was the faithful and discreet slave. It was,
And that was our understanding at the time. It's changed.
Yeah.
And it changes all the time, and that's what you expect.